So, first question is to Guy. Guy, does big data inspire or hinder creative thinking? This is your chance to win the Admap prize.
I think we're a bit late, aren't I? Well, it's sort of puzzling, isn't it? The feelings around that question, because if you skip outside our industry a moment, there's no doubt that fantastic ideas have been had from data. So Archimedes had his bath, didn't he? The bath data. Galileo dropped his balls off Tower of Pisa. That's kind of falling data. Newton had his apple data. And there's no doubt that their ideas were influenced by their data. No one would contend that point. But then even in our industry, no one would contend either that data hasn't helped creativity through a thing called strategy. So data inspires strategy, inspires creative work. No one would contend with that. But what happens, I think, is the closer data is coming to the creative itself, the more people get nervous. And so you mentioned real-time optimization, where it looks like the data is driving the creative work. Or in the BA example, dynamic content work, the data is in the work. Or with programmatic, it looks like the data's making the decisions about the work. Or in the books, in your beautiful books, the data is the work. And when the data becomes so close to the creativity, that's when people get nervous. Without wishing to ladder this point too high, I think the nervousness relates to man versus machine, where the man is creativity, mankind is creativity. That's what distinguishes us from animals. Our leaps of imagination are what make us as a species so great. And the machine is data. It's the centre of data, the ones and the zeros. And there's this dystopian future and fantasy of man versus machine, and the machine wins. I think there's the same thought here, that there's a dystopian view of Can, where creativity versus data, and the data wins. So long answer, sorry, Colin. But my personal view is it does help, but I understand the concerns around it.
Okay, thank you, Guy. Mark, from the brand perspective, do you see the same sort of level of anxiety around data and the term big data? Or is it more of an anxiety within agencies than brand owners, do you think?
I don't think there is an anxiety, but there is probably more so what are we going to do with it? There is so much, and I'm also a huge believer in artificial intelligence. I think that we are going to see a development of artificial intelligence, not just in the way we market to consumer, but also in the way we do market it. And so, for instance, through an initiative which I led at Unilever, which is the Unilever Foundry, which I encourage you to do, because we have 50 startups that Unilever brought. Unilever has 50 startups that were brought to Cannes through the Foundry. But the reality is, we had one, for instance, which was powered by artificial intelligence on feature phone to help provide recipes for women in developing countries, at the time of dinner, based on what they had in their fridge. And it was all powered by artificial intelligence. And so this was interesting, because instead of creating fear, the marketers just asked the question, how do we use cell phone, feature phones, to help bring something useful to people around our food brands propositions. And suddenly the artificial intelligence enabled solution came up, and it was simple. The principle of the Foundry, it's $50,000, 6 weeks, a brief on pitch to pilot, And in 6 weeks, it went from almost, fear to prototype. And I think we're going to need to do some of that with data, is make sure that we experiment and that we de-dramatize a little bit big data. Because, the reality, it's not about big data, it's about, the small part, the data that you're going to use to actually make something out of it that's going to be useful to the people we serve, the consumers.
Okay, thank you. Emma, is the problem, as the Admap Prize-winning essay argued, that big data implies certainty of outcome, when in fact creativity involves risk and failure to get to the best creative solution?
I think I agree with Guy. There's quite a lot of hyperbole spoken about big data, and when you take a very extreme view, you do get the idea that data gives you certainty, that it can tell you what will work and what won't work. One of the essay writers said data doesn't give security, it just gives validation, and it gives corporate validation. It depersonalizes risk. And I actually think we've all got a bit of a responsibility to be clear about what it does do and what it doesn't do. I was reminded this morning of a great, Ogilvy quote, which is, people tend to use research or data the way that a drunk uses a lamppost, for support and not for illumination. And if we take that view, that data is simply support, we're missing out the really massive point that the illumination is now extraordinary. That lamppost is now sky high, and it opens up so many opportunities. And yes, that will mean that we will get it wrong more often, or we will go through more iterations, which is the way I prefer to describe failure. But I think, yes, there's a risk if we take that very extreme view. But I think if we all understand that difference between certainty and validation, then I think that we're going to start to think about it as illumination rather than support.
David, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I think it's true that the creative process does tend to orientate itself around failing and iteration, as you say, the creative word for it. So I see a useful tension there, because you have the rigidity and the structure and the apparent certainty of data meeting the fuzzy, slightly fiery, inventive, creative force of creativity, and the two kind of alchemize each other. You get the best from data and the best from creativity. Creativity thrives within limits. Data provides certain limits, parameters you can't go beyond. And data itself is, in its essence, quite boring, structurally, tight, structured and rigid. So it needs something like visualization or creativity to inflame it, to enliven it, to humanize it, to bring it alive, to colorize it, and to make it appealing and accessible to everyone.
You mentioned visualization there. Can you tell us, where you think data visualization is best employed?
Yeah, I'm a little biased, obviously, because that's what I do and I love doing, and I have a passion for visualizing data. It's partly for the reason I just described, because I struggle to comprehend and get excited about numbers, just in the flat sense. So for me, I often trawl through data to find hidden stories or unexpected patterns or connections that feels exciting, feels like a type of journalism or a type of scientific exploration. Visualization helps reveal those, and you use the circuitry of your mind and your eyes, which is much faster than your brain can process words and so on. So it's a very rapid way of spotting interesting things, outliers, as we were saying. But it also, we're in a connected world, so we can't take single data points or in a bunch of data and claim that it's meaningful. We have to link it up with other data to make information, link that information up with other data to make knowledge, if you like, and to make context. And the more context there is, the more meaning there is. And so visualization is a great way of creating meaning, alchemizing meaning out of the lead, if you like, of data.
Okay. Mark, value exchange. We need to get buy-in from consumers. What kind of value exchange do you think will induce buy-in from consumers to, willingly share their data?
So there is a huge debate on privacy, and actually I was on a panel yesterday or the day before yesterday, and someone said actually, and I really believe it's true, there is a loosening year after year. We get much more relaxed on what we actually share. You know, a while ago we wouldn't have shared, you know, our cell phone number or email with anyone. And now, you know, we put it on Twitter or whatever, and we share it broadly, you know, to almost everyone. Why? Because fundamentally we get value out of it. So first of all, the context has changed. More and more people actually are giving up some of their personal data, but also they realize that you get a lot of it. I remember a few years ago, someone who was actually working, no, I'm not going to say it, but just told me that he had chosen to always opt in on everything that Google and Android asked, because fundamentally he got much more return. And I believe it's true. We are going to find more and more as data and technology becomes more powerful, that actually the more we give, the more we get. And again, it's then there is, again, apologies for the ones who have not seen the Her movie. There is a haha moment where you realize that it's not her, it's not, you know, Scarlett. It's actually a machine. But the reality, we're gonna all believe that the more we share, the more we get back, and it feels extremely empathetic. It feels really that you're getting something, you know, that's customized to you, that's made for you. And so I think that the value exchange is going to be, this new value exchange is going to be the name of the game. And we are going to need to realize that the value exchange is no longer what we have all been used to, which was trading money for product. Okay, so I give you my money to buy your product, and by the way, in doing so, I have two pots of money, one for the trade and one for the media, so that I actually, you know, buy your goodwill to buy my product. And the reality now, people want the full Monty. They want, you know, services and solutions and experience. And so we're going to see that the more we think of them not as a, you know, if you're Nike, you know, do you want to buy a pair of shoes? Or, you know, do you want to go for a ride, for a run? And if you're able to say to people, you know, hey, welcome to Cannes. These are a few, you know, of the runs that, you know, you could do, and that, by the way, some of your friends have done or are going to do tomorrow morning or whatever, then you've really created a value for me, because I don't know where to run in Cannes. Actually, nobody runs in Cannes, do they? But they run at night, not in the morning.
I think the industry's got to sort its narrative out to achieve what you're saying there, I think, Mark, because at the moment the narrative is about data is useful for targeting, or data is useful for efficiency, and these are supply side concepts. These are of absolutely zero value to people, but that's our narrative, is big data has got lots for us, and we need to change the conversation to be what you're describing, which is big data is something for you. But we don't talk like that. So we're partly to blame for there being this tension.
Yeah. I mean, I think the interesting question is what that exchange is, and what I'm getting back from the provider. You know, it doesn't have to be a bribe, it doesn't have to be money. It could be something about me, some information about me. I'm sure I'm not the only person here who finds me the most fascinating subject in the world. And if you put that into some context, that's even more fascinating for me, and that's a value exchange that's coming to me. To pick up on Mark's point about Nike, you know, one of the best things that I've seen in the last 12 months is their My Year project. You know, they took your data. They told you what you had done last year, and on the 1st of January you got a personalised training plan for the next year. Now that's really useful. If I'm a committed runner, that's somebody taking my data and turning it into something useful, and that is tailored for me. And I agree with Guy. It's something very different to targeting. It's about thinking about how I can deliver that data back to people and not to consumers in a way that they find some use from.
Thank you. In the Admap Prize essays, it was noticeable that there were very few examples of data being employed creatively in advertising. Mark, in his talk, referenced the one that was most popularly cited, which was the British Airways Magic of Flying campaign, which was a fantastic campaign. Also the Dove Real Beauty campaign with the insight that only is it 2% or 4% of women think themselves attractive, which informed that whole fantastic award-winning campaign. But there were very few examples. Why do you think that is, Guy?
Well, the slightly dull answer is because it's new, so there aren't many cases yet. So the new category this year, people haven't learned how to write them up or done enough of them. But the maybe a more helpful point would be the creative community needs to embrace data and not shun it or be suspicious of it, and that will help. I think that data threatens a view of creativity, which is a creative as a lone genius who's born with this sort of lateral DNA and has eureka moments, and it's uninformed by data or anything else. It's just their lone brilliance, for which they get paid a lot of money in advertising agencies. And along comes data and kind of threatens that, instead of looking like it can just kind of evolve it. And that mindset will mean that the cases won't recognise data. There won't be enthusiasm for creators to write up data cases, because it detracts from the purity of the creative leap. And so I think there's a macro point that would help.
Okay.
One of the things, if I may add, one of the things that happened in the world, if you remember, none of us were born, but Da Vinci. At the time of Leonardo da Vinci, there was no division between left brain and right brain, between art and science. What he did was a beautiful object, and it was the power also of science to create objects that could fly, that could anyway. And then there was a separation between the two. And over the last almost 3 centuries, there was a separation in universities, in the way we've been taught for 300 years, between the discipline of art and the discipline of science. And I really think that was fundamentally wrong. That there was a separation of the logic and the magic, as I like to call it. And the reality, I think that the power, sits in the fusion of both. And so we are going to see, I think, again, thanks to technology, we're going to see actually that we're going to be able to bring back those two sciences, or art and sciences, disciplines, that have been separated for 300 years just because, somebody thought they were smarter, and that the creative guys were just good to, do some, fun and some entertainment, and the powers sat in the guy who could do the math.
David, do you think that one of the problems is that we're wrestling with trying to integrate too much data, too many data streams? Should we, worry less about scale?
Yeah, I agree with what Mark was saying there. I think I meet a lot of people when I do workshops teaching data viz, and a lot of people are afraid of data. They literally freeze when they're faced with it. And I think some of that's about numeracy and a fear of messing with the data. But also I think there's a whole culture in industries and ad agencies are researchers and research and analysis as a separate skill. And I think you need to cross those two streams to get the best results with data and data visualization. And I think it's intimidating to even hear the term big data, because it implies volume and velocity and variety that's overwhelming. It's like a big hose pipe, fire engine type thing. It's going to flood your office and flood your mind with this gunk. So, I mean, I generally don't use the term big data, because I find it's a bit of a misnomer, because it sounds like a noun, but it's a verb. It actually describes a process. So if you're doing big data in your organization, you're gathering and handling large amounts of data, you're structuring and examining that data, and then hopefully you're discovering something about that data and delivering something back into your organization. So it's actually a process. It's actually a verb if you're doing big data. And a lot of companies just don't leap over into the discovery and the delivery stage, because that's where you need the creativity. That's when you need that ambition and that lack of fear, just to ask a question, be journalistic or scientific, and say, what do we want to learn from this data? What do we want to find out from this data?
There is a view that the sense in which data grows, like it can overtake a garden. It just kind of abundantly spews out of the world, unbeknownst to us. And of course, the data is man-made. There's only data because someone decided to program and tag it and code it, so we got it, or thought it was worthwhile measuring it. So the sense of we're actually in control of it, but the whole language and the narrative is that it's out of control.
Okay, a question I'd be interested in the views of all the panel on this one. If data drives personalisation of messaging, which follows you everywhere, is impossible to avoid, what challenges does this pose to creativity and the whole communications planning process?
Well, at the risk of a cliche, I don't really think it's a challenge, it's an opportunity. If advertising or utility or services are going to follow me around everywhere that I go on every device that I use, then it better be really good. Otherwise, it's really going to annoy me. You need to know who I am, and you really need to know who I am. Don't send me stuff that is not relevant to me. So maybe I'm a glass half full person, but I actually think that there's a massive opportunity to move some of the budget towards creativity. You've got to get it right. You're probably going to have to make multiple versions of the same execution, and you're going to have to think very carefully about how you get those to the people. As Guy was saying, the machines can target this stuff and they can deliver it, but we have to make sure it's only human beings who are going to make sure that the connection is made with each of those individual segments. You know enough about me not to send me stuff that isn't relevant to me, so I expect not to see it anymore. So I think arguably there's growth there for creative.
Guy, what about the challenges for a creative agency like JWT that has made money by making TV ads for huge audiences, and now there's this need for a switch to personalising, creative. What's the challenges for JWT?
Well, I think the premise of the question that the role of marketing with big data is now to sort of surround people at every turn with some sort of personalised thing, I think is the wrong model. Just as I think we've kind of largely moved away from the sense of 360-degree communications, where it was largely about kind of coverage. The future model, I think Mark touched on very well, it's about moments of value, the opportunity to provide more moments of value to more individual people is the opportunity, and sometimes that value can come in the form of a video. It can be a more personalised video. And so the very same skills of storytelling that have driven some traditional formats can be reapplied and personalised. But the framework that drives it is moments of value, not surround sound marketing.
Okay, great. Right, maybe we'll throw this over to the audience now. Does anybody have a question for our panel, or a view to express? Yes.
Thank you. I have a question for Mark, maybe the rest of the panel also. Interested to get some additional examples of work that was born from big data, specifically thinking about the Speak Beautiful campaign that really looked at the big data of conversations in the social sphere around how women were describing themselves, and leverage that big data to then provide positive reinforcements for how they should be thinking about their bodies and themselves. Great example of how big data can be harnessed for creativity. Do you have other examples you could share with us?
What were the other examples that,
David and I were just talking earlier on today about, there's a beautiful project called the Berlin Wall of Sound that SoundCloud did, which is absolutely stunning and thinking about data in a really different way. You all know SoundCloud and the kind of track that you get across. And they developed a soundscape that was 7 minutes 32 seconds long, which is apparently the time it would take for a sound wave to pass along the Berlin Wall. And they created a soundscape so that it mimicked the Berlin Wall. And if you go across SoundCloud, normally you get comments from people. And this was every place along the wall where somebody had died. They gave you some information about that person and how they died there. I mean, that's SoundCloud data, and it's very specific. But they were sourcing that data from other places about the obituaries, and I just think that's such an extraordinarily kind of 360 view of the way that data can be thought about and then represented. I think it's one of the best things I've seen in the last year.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Yes.
Hi, I know I'm in Cannes and it's the advertising festival, so I may get abused for saying this, but if you look around other industries, and I know that the question is, does big data inspire or hinder creative thinking? If you look around other industries, whether you take Uber, you take technology, you take healthcare, you wouldn't ask that question. You simply wouldn't ask, because it's clearly just inspiring. So is it really a question about the advertising industry, and why hasn't it just inspired the advertising industry, and why can it be seen as hindering?
I think part of it is because we are prisoners of a model where we think that fundamentally, what I was hinting to before, we produce products, then we market them through communication on media on one hand, and distribution and shelves on the other hand, and that's been the model we have all been building the industry around. And then comes the Uber of this world, and they say no, not at all. I'm going to actually build a lifelong relationship with people, contrarily to ours, where every year you start the year with a debit on your bank account, because you know that you need to advertise and you need to promote. Otherwise, you don't have a business. Whereas Uber says, no, I actually already have so many million of people. And that changes the game. I was referenced before Under Armour. Under Armour, by acquiring several companies in the tech business, has now, well, I don't know whether that was private information or not, but a sizable amount of people in their database which they would not have had otherwise. But just because suddenly they embraced technology and they thought of themselves not as a sports apparel company, but as a technology brand that uses technology and apparels to enable people, to be athletes, and so I think that it's really a mindset shift, and I think that's what is so difficult for all of us. And I've tested it many times. It's difficult for us to think that whatever we do, everybody, and I really believe that every company, every FMCG company, needs to rethink of itself as a technology company. And if we don't, I mean, companies that won't rethink of themselves as technology companies will not be present in 5 years or 10 years' time.